Hello, friends. Really glad you can join us today. I'm excited to have a special guest with me who I actually recently met at the 4th Annual Barefoot Summit in New York City, the Barefoot Strong Summit, run by Dr. Emily Splickle, a mutual friend of ours. And when I met with my guest, my brain exploded. So I'd like to introduce my friend and my special guest, Bryan Mirabella. Hey, man, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, thanks so much for joining me, because my viewers and listeners are going to love what we're going to talk about today because of your expertise. Last Wednesday in New York City, you and I sat down and had a cup of Java, and I'm like, okay, he's got to be a guest because this stuff is so important. And what I'm talking about, particularly, even though we talked about a lot on Wednesday, I would love to pick your brain about breathing, because I up until this year have had so many misconceptions about what is good, what is proper, what is the best type of breathing. So, yeah. Bryan, it's all yours. Talk to me. Tell us, how do you look at breathing? How do you approach it? How do you approach it with your patients, your clients, and yourself too?
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate this. And it was
my pleasure.
A wonderful meeting to hear you talk at the ABFA Summit, and then to have you ask me to meet and do this podcast. So I'm really excited.
My pleasure, man.
Well, I've been a fitness professional for 26 years, and I've taken every certification. Well, I shouldn't say certification. I should say higher learning, like Thomas Myers Movement, Institute of Motion, EBFA work, so I'm constantly looking for the best strategies to help other people. And
yes.
About 2 years ago, I came across Wim Hof, the Iceman.
Yeah.
For those who don't know him, he's got 26 world records of doing feats of cold training where he's made himself into this superhuman individual, and he says he does it through his breath. So I started practicing the Wim Hof technique. I went to a seminar. I downloaded his program. I started doing it. And last January, I was out in the cold when it was 8 degrees in New York City with a 17-degree wind chill, and my son and I were walking outside in shorts and meditating in the snow. And I did that by being able to control my autonomic nervous system through my breath. And prior to that, I've spent 47 winters in New York City, and all I can think about is being able to move to Hawaii because I couldn't take it anymore.
Yes.
I still love my city.
I remember you telling me about that last week, Hawaii.
Yeah. So I found Wim Hof and I started doing the breath technique, and I became superhuman. I was able to deal with the cold. I was going out every single day. It didn't matter what the temperature was, in shorts and a t-shirt.
Whoa.
Yeah. And then, so for the last 2 years, I've been focusing on breathing. Now, prior to that, with all my higher learning movement specialties I have, no one's talked about breathing.
Right.
I mean, if you're moving, don't you have to know how to breathe well? But I'm saying it like, isn't it so common? Except I wasn't thinking about it.
Right.
No, I've been in the field for years and it wasn't brought to my attention, which means it's not being brought to anybody's attention when they go for their yearly physical. Now, if you think about it, the way I'm now taught in breathing, now I might have gotten my start in Wim Hof, but I don't practice the Wim Hof technique anymore because I've learned physiologically more correct ways to breathe. What Wim Hof does is superventilation techniques, which are good to activate your sympathetic nervous system, but not so good to do every day in your life because it creates a factor of over breathing.
Okay.
And the whole goal of breathing is to be able to breathe so silently and gently that, number one, you can't hear me breathe. So if you can hear me breathe, I have a real problem.
Okay.
And that problem is what we call overbreathing, but it can lead to all disorders. It usually starts with sleep apnea, which most people struggle to breathe, struggle to sleep, and they don't realize that it's because they struggle to breathe when they're awake.
Oh.
Exercise-induced asthma. Now, exercise-induced asthma can be, I'm in the middle of a set, I think I worked out really hard, and I'm like at the end of a set, but a lot of times people can't catch their breath.
Right.
Recover from that. Well, that's actually exercise-induced asthma because it creates a hyperventilation response, which is what we don't want. Now, I'll try to say this as simply as I can, but if I'm hyperventilating, I'm blowing out carbon dioxide from my system. Now,
Okay.
we think CO2 is a waste gas, but it's not when it's inside our bloodstream. Inside our red blood cell, CO2 acts like a hormone. It's a signaling molecule. So CO2 is over here, and then wherever to the right, left, up, down, you got an oxygen molecule that is bound to hemoglobin inside the red blood cell. Now, we all know our red blood cells carry oxygen. Now, if we put a pulse oximeter on our finger, it would say we were roughly 96 to 99% saturated with oxygen already.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the key. How do you get the oxygen untrapped from the hemoglobin so it's delivered to the organs and tissues? Now, in the past, we were taught, well, take in a deep breath because you get more oxygen into your lungs. True, we fill our lungs with more air, but untrue that the oxygen gets from the lung to the organs and tissues and bloodstream. The only way it does that is through a physiological law that was created in 1904 by a man named Christian Bohr, who's the father of Nobel Prize quantum winning scientist Niels Bohr.
Okay.
So his father came up with a law, and it's called the oxygen hemoglobin disassociation curve. So in our blood, if carbon dioxide is high, that means it's telling all the 96 to 99% saturation of oxygen we already have, it's telling hemoglobin, let go of that molecule so I can deliver it to the organs and tissues. But in order to have that effect be efficient, we can't take in a deep breath. Now, there's been papers written on this, one particularly by Magarian, Magarin, which I can give you a link at the end if you want to put in the podcast.
Sure, yeah.
What I just did was a big breath in order to speak, and that was incorrect. So when I take in a big breath, and the reason I had to take in that big breath is because I'm talking a lot. Mm-hmm. So I'm over breathing. Okay. So I'm offloading carbon dioxide because I'm not cycling my breath. So when I went to talk, I had to take in a big breath because I felt as if I was drowning for air, because when I was talking a lot and offloading CO2, I was creating respiratory alkalosis, which is creating an affinity between hemoglobin and oxygen.
Okay.
The opposite of respiratory alkalosis, which is what we don't want, and even one big breath creates that affinity, is we want the Bohr law to do what it's physiologically designed to do, and that's by taking in small breaths of air. So I'll do it for the camera. So it would sound like this.
Okay.
Can you hear that?
Yep.
So the reason I'm making a noise is just so you can hear that I'm never taking in a full inhalation, and I'm never fully exhaling. And believe it or not, you aren't either, not even right now while you're listening to me. You're not sitting there going,
right. Right.
If you did, you'd be starting to hyperventilate. You'd start to get dizzy, and you'd start to get even more out of breath. You'd start to become stressed. So if you think about it, meditation teachers nowadays and yoga instructors and physiotherapists are telling people, take a deep breath in And I'm not condemning anybody, but there's a science behind this. It's a physiological effect. And we need to know what that physiological effect is. So if you take a deep breath, you're getting respiratory alkalosis. And if you take a small, gentle, silent breath, you're getting the Bohr effect because you're keeping carbon dioxide high in the bloodstream.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's a signaling molecule, it's telling hemoglobin, take that 97% of saturation of oxygen and deliver it to my organs and tissues.
I see.
My body's very smart.
Right.
So it will send the oxygen to the organs and tissues that need it the most first.
Okay. All right.
Incredible. So this needs to be taught to everyone. And when you go to the doctor and you have your yearly physical, they stick a thermometer in your mouth and they test your temperature, and it's supposed to be 98.6. Physiological law. Then they take your blood pressure, and it's supposed to be roughly 120/80. Physiological norm.
Mm-hmm.
They don't test your airway. And they don't see, maybe when you're like 8 years old, I think that's the last time they test children's airways. So let's say you're 8 years old and you have a reduced airway that's 6 millimeters. And it's supposed to be 12 to 14. It's like trying to breathe a golf ball, trying to inhale a golf ball through a garden hose. Mm-hmm. But this goes on your whole life. Mm-hmm. So your whole life, you're in respiratory alkalosis, which is activating the fight or flight response, because we know that my diaphragm is my glossopharyngeal nerve, which is number 9, and it's directly connected to my tongue, which is cranial nerve number 11, and that controls my CO2, O2 intake and outtake. So I'm over breathing all the time. Mm-hmm. My oxygen saturation levels are dropped automatically because my cranial nerves aren't firing properly, and cranial nerve number 11 is directly in your tongue and your mouth, is directly married to cranial nerve number 10, which is your vagus nerve.
Okay.
If your vagus nerve is functioning with high vagal tone, you're in fight or flight, and your vagus nerve goes to all the organs in your body. So stop me, because I know I've gone off and I've gone into science. So do you have any questions? Because I know I'm starting to get into the cranial nerves, because you kind of have to talk about.
That's cool though. Nerves. No, I think that's cool. So I want to go back to something you said. So your body's smart. It's going to send the oxygen to the organs it needs most first. Do you think that this has anything to do with manifestation in some way or form of any kind of diseases that might be occurring out there? I already know the answer because we talked about it Wednesday, but tell us, please.
Well, that's a great question. I mean, we now know, I think it's maybe not in Western pharmaceutical world, but we do know that inflammation is the root cause of all disease. Mm-hmm. So if we're inflamed, the only way we could have gotten inflamed is because we didn't have enough oxygen supply to the cell. Mm-hmm. And if you're a community of 100 trillion cells, and all 100 trillion cells have 100 trillion atoms pulsating around the cell, it means that 99.9% of us is space, quantum physics. Then you have to talk about energy.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have to.
All right. Well, so I'm going to segue real quick. We can come back and bob and weave. That's what I do when we talk, right? To anyone, mainly because everything is connected to everything else. So all the subjects really go together, even though they're different subcategories or whatever. So I teach a Parkinson's course all over the world. I know statistically that number 2 cause of death in a person with Parkinson's, statistically, are complications from a breathing issue. Within that, number 1 cause of death and breathing issues is pneumonia. And the first thing I think of when I think about breathing, and the people who I work with, and this is also one of the reasons I would love to have you be a guest at my Huntington workshop on the Sunday that you can come over in December, is I think about breathing. I think about the lack of dopamine, which creates changes in ventilatory parameters, and what can we do to help this population? Now, they have the dopamine issue. So their breathing issues, maybe they're different than some others to a little bit of a degree or a lot, I don't know. But it seems like everyone, well, that's not right. Like most people may have a breathing issue, even if it's not an issue that causes them poor health. But going back, when you think of somebody with, let's say, a disorder, let's talk about Parkinson's. I don't think you have to know much about it to know, but just think about the fact that their parameters are restricted. They don't breathe the way they should. How do you look at that as a practitioner, let's say? What would you be advising them? Or anyone for that matter?
Okay, well, number one, get on the Naboso mat.
Yeah, so here we go.
Yeah.
I end up plugging Naboso at every interview because these things are so freaking awesome. And actually the shipment arriving today, UPS, which we may get interrupted for, is the Neuro. I have 25 pairs of Neuros coming because I'm taking them to Mexico with me this week. But so yes, get on the Naboso mat.
Yeah, well, number one, you got to get on the Naboso mat because you have to stimulate the proprioceptors in your feet. So there's thousands of small free nerve endings, and 80% of those are for sensory.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you have a brain issue, you can't have motor function without having a sensory input malfunction.
Yeah.
Everything has to start sensory. So what I would do is I'd get them on the Naboso mat, and I would get a popsicle stick in between their teeth.
Okay.
Because what I do is with the stick, keeping it in between the teeth, it keeps cranial nerve number 5, the trigeminal, offline. If they press their teeth at all together, it doesn't allow the other nerves, cranial nerves, to do their job. So you got to keep the teeth apart. And when you get them on the Naboso mat, stick in between their teeth, you have them breathe very gently in and out through the nose. So the mat stimulates vagal tone, and the stick activates your parasympathetic nervous system.
Okay.
So immediately, you could get them into a parasympathetic state within seconds.
Wow.
So stick in between the teeth, tongue on the roof of the mouth. Again, I can get very scientific with why those cranial nerves need to be rewired, but the goal is to free up the airway.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you have a brain issue, your brain stem somehow gets misaligned. It's kind of what craniosacral work is about. So if your brain stem is even a millimeter off from, let's say, people who have Parkinson's, it's hard to know when they were 5 years old, did they run into a wall?
Right.
If they ran into a wall at 5 years old, and chances are a lot of kids have, doesn't mean you're going to have Parkinson's, but it does mean that if the brain trauma was enough, it can throw the brain stem out of alignment, which creates a miswiring of a cranial nerve. If you have a miswiring of a cranial nerve, chances are your tongue isn't going to work right because that's your sensory input.
UPS is here, so here's what we'll do. Just hang on a minute. I know where we'll pick up. Hey, all right.
Nuts, man. For this part, that's cool, but otherwise, just wait for him to get back. Want to see my kitty? That's a paw.
All right. 25 pairs of neuros. Boom. So here's, I think the best place to pick up, because I can do a nice easy splice, is let's go back to, you don't know if when they were 5 they might have run into a wall. Just give like 2 seconds and then boom.
So when they were 5, they might have ran into a wall. And if you run into a wall at 5 years old, you have brain trauma, and that can misalign your brainstem. And that's going to miswire a cranial nerve. So you obviously at that age, you recover from it. Everybody thinks you're fine. But 20 years later, you might have a motor dysfunction that shows up in a movement pattern. And it just looks like people go, well, we need to stretch. Like, let's say it's a lunging forward. And as I lunge forward, I fall over to the side. So in the movement world, people go, oh, we need to strengthen your glutes. Well, yes, but I can't improve my motor function without changing the sensory input first, because I'm a human being.
Right.
And the nervous system sensed something before I had a physical manifestation or representation of this environmental signal that was coming into me. And that's what epigenetics is all about.
Okay.
So I'm always sensing the environment and then putting it into my 5 senses. And we have 5 physical senses, but we also have probably up to 14 etheric senses, but I'll go with the 2. ESP, extrasensory perception.
Mm-hmm.
And number 7, which the Naboso mat is exceptional for, is interoceptive sense. So if I have a brain trauma, a physical brain trauma, or an emotional brain trauma where I was in a car accident. I have a client, and she was 5. She was in a car accident, and her mom got killed. And she survived. You know, you physically might think you've moved on from that type of an issue, but it was an energetic trauma to the system.
Yeah.
Think of it like a bomb exploding and you have black all over you. Once you wipe the black off, you think it's gone, but that left an imprint, right? Like a volcanic imprint in your nervous system.
Sure.
So it goes to the brain. So I would guarantee that anybody who has any kind of brain injury as they're older, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, dementia, it had to do with some sort of physical trauma to the head and potentially a lot of emotional stress during your life, because emotional stress is energy. If people all around you die and it hurts you, it's an imploding bomb that creates an impression in your nervous system, albeit a invisible impression.
Sure.
But we can see what these impressions are by neurologically looking at your tongue, your nose, and your throat.
Mm-hmm.
4 techniques that I was talking about that I would show you can help to rewire and bring the cranial nerves back online. And they're very simple techniques that I'm sure a Parkinson's patient would be able to do and have great success with, because not only do they need the movement, but they got to change the sensory input in order to change the motor output. That's the only way it works.
Right.
It's really the only way.
Yeah. So interesting. I think about, well, what about, let's say, other diseases and things like that? So are you thinking, tell me more about how this, let's say the trauma, let's just say the trauma in general can.
If that sensory input was traumatic, it led to your cranial nerve being miswired, let's say number 11, and you're no longer activating your tongue and you're breathing through your mouth, your constant overbreathing led to a lack of oxygen in your body, which led to the manifestation of the illness or the disease or the sickness, but it had to start sensory. So of course I talk about breathing, and I'm good. And in my sessions, I start with breathing and I end with breathing, but I'm also thinking about can I rewire their cranial nerves in order to help change their breathing? Because then if I help change their breathing, I help change their motor coordination.
Yeah. I just I just ordered on Audible, Joe Dispenza book. I think it's called something about superhuman.
Becoming Superhuman.
Yes, that's it. Becoming Superhuman. I just started listening literally like 2 hours ago, so I'm through maybe 30 minutes of it. I'm not even into chapter 1. But I think you mentioned his name to me the other day, and of course, when I hear anything from somebody who I look up to, respect, whatever, I know you have expertise, I'm buying it. So I bought 2 of his books. I forget the other one. But what I find really interesting is this whole idea of the impression on your nervous system, impression on your cells, and what that can do to you if you, well, what it can do to you, but also what you can do to it to change, maybe reverse, delay disease progression, maybe reverse diseases. And he talks about it in the first 10 minutes. He talks about stories we will hear in the book about reversing disease through various types of, I think it might have been meditation and breathing.
Yeah.
And intention behind it. Of course, there's intention and all that.
Well, intention is energy.
Yeah.
All his science is neuroplasticity.
Yeah.
And they do the science behind it. It's not just rhetoric. We're not just talking about the invisible nature that we're surrounded in. Mm-hmm. It's scientifically proven. It's called the Planck constant. Science can prove it. It's 10 to the minus 93. So the universe, every cell in your body is a black hole. It's a singularity. Mm-hmm. It has to come back in on itself because at the molecular level, the electrons are spinning. So it has to spin in and out, right? A toroidal force field.
Wow, yeah. Yeah.
So if our thoughts, or it starts from being emotionally attacked and physically damaged. Mm-hmm. I would call it an emotional attack because I grew up with a woman who was bipolar personality disorder, and she really did a number on me. And I've had to come out of that by rewiring my subconscious brain, because my mom used to tell me, no, it's okay, I could tell people, but if you're being told when you're a little boy that you're never going to be anything and you're a piece of crap, you believe that. So neurons that wire together fire together.
Yeah, totally.
If I hear that, so these are my neurons, and in the space in between that's my synapse. Every time I hear that, at the DNA level, there's a photon of light, and it makes an imprint. But on the physical level, we see neurons and synapses. But it's on the energetic level first, the sensory first, DNA and light. So every time I hear that, I start to be able to call on it and believe it. Now I'm going through life, and I might be the captain of the wrestling team, leader of the gym and all this, but in the back of my mind, I still believe I'm a piece of crap. And that belief energetically becomes trapped in my energy body, and they know where. That's what acupuncture is. They know that if you have family trouble, it can show up as lower back pain. And people go, well, I tripped, and when I tripped, I wrenched my back, and that's why I hurt my disc. That might have been the event where it finally manifested, but the blocked energy was already there, and it was waiting for an event to set it in motion.
Right. Okay.
You follow
Yeah,
that?
it's so interesting. We talked about this on Wednesday, and I forgot about that part. But the
Yeah.
whole the blocked energy, pain, where it can occur, or how it can manifest, when it really has probably much less to do with physical than it does energy blockage. And to me, that is all so fascinating. The other thing too, I was talking with Perry Nicholson this morning, and we were talking about lack of self-worth, self-doubt. He and I both struggled for a long time thinking we were not worthy of success. We're not worthy of a lot of things. And we were comparing ourselves to others during those times for a long time, both of us. And that can be a very difficult thing to come out of because of what you were just describing, the synapses, right? And they wire and beliefs. I mean, I forget who, it might have been Thomas Myers the other day. I think he said when you choose to believe something, it is a choice, it's a decision, but then you wire up that way. And now it's like until you find out that maybe you do have a choice of changing, some people get stuck. People are stuck all over the world. I was stuck for 48 years, basically. And it's all so fascinating to me. And I can see why people can be in pain because of their beliefs about whatever, trauma, emotional trauma, other kinds of trauma.
Yeah.
Totally fascinating.
And the way I would suggest to come out of it is through the breath. What I do when I meditate is I make sure, ultimately you're supposed to meditate with your feet crossed in lotus position. Well, I can't get into lotus position.
I mean, either, man.
I utilize my Naboso mat.
Mm-hmm.
So I sit, I get my bare feet on the mat. So I know that I'm already activating my vagus nerve. So it brings my body into a parasympathetic state just from the mat alone. I don't use the stick when I'm meditating, but I focus on taking the tiniest sips of air. Now, when I do that with my breath, I raise my carbon dioxide levels in my blood, which floods my system with oxygen. Now, where we're tense inside our bodies on the physical level is toxicity in the cell. It's not, people think, oh, my muscles are tight, so my muscles tight, but they forget that everything has to go back to the cell.
Mm-hmm.
So muscles wrapped in fascia. Fascia is the coating of every cell in your body, every system in your body, every organ in your body. It makes up your bones. It's your cast. If I drained all the cells out of your body except for fascia, I'd be standing here. It would look like a cocoon and I would be totally white. And they've done it with hearts and organs. They've drained all the other cells except for fascia out of the organ, and it's a white cast. It looks like a loofah.
Right.
Right? So inside that loofah pad sits so here's my loofah pad. My nerves travel through the loofah pad. My lymphs travel through the loofah pad. My nerves travel through the loofah pad. My blood vessels travel through the loofah pad. My muscle tissue travels through the loofah pad. If that loofah pad is restricted, first of all, it's restricted from the manifested energies that we had. So it shows up in the fascia because fascia is 80% proprioceptors. That sense your environment. So now it's squeezing on the nerves, the lymph, and the blood vessels. So the rest of our body's not going to work well.
Mm-hmm.
When you do the subtle breath, which Stanford actually wrote a paper in 2017, and they confirmed that through the subtle breath, and they mean, like I was saying, it should be relaxing, but it's the tiniest sips of air. So it's almost like you're trying to stop the inhale because your body doesn't breathe to breathe in oxygen.
Mm-hmm.
The breathing mechanism is to release CO2. So with the tiny breath, we're teaching our brain stem, particularly the lower half where the medulla is, which is your respiratory center. We're teaching the respiratory center to take tiny breaths. So it keeps carbon dioxide high, which pushes out carbon monoxide. Now, once I start pushing out the toxicity, I create a lower vagal tone in my body. When I have a lower vagal tone, because my vagus nerve touches all my organs, I start having better energy flow. When I start having better energy flow, people don't understand this. They think that their thoughts are who they are. But when I start feeling better, I start having better thoughts. Because the reason I had the thought in the first place is because I encompassed a state of being. So if I say to myself, oh my God, I'm afraid about tomorrow, I have this big test, I'm taking on this state of fear, which is
yeah.
thought. So through the subtle breath, I can activate on a daily basis a parasympathetic tone that will override those sensory inputs. It'll start to clean out the fatty acids that are over the synapse that creates the faster response.
Mm-hmm.
That's what happens in the synapse. Every time you have that thought, it's a fatty acid, and the fatty acid makes the synapse work really fast. So my brain, unbelievable, but Harvard does all the research on meditation, my brain starts to clean out the fatty acids, the synapses. So those thoughts are always going to be there because they're an imprint, and thoughts are energy, words are energy, so they never go away. But what starts to happen is when I start to feel better, I have that state of being, of feeling good, I start to think better thoughts. And now I start to create a new myelinated sheath over that synapse with fatty acids, but in a better response.
Right.
Which epigenetically triggers my DNA to express itself in a more positive way. Because every DNA has 3 billion ways to express itself. So now through my breath, I start to be able to activate my DNA and to rewire or allow my DNA to express itself in the way that's in my highest good. It's there. And the only reason we get sick is because our breathing rate changed to become over breathing our whole lives, which created a lack of oxygen, which created the DNA, because I don't feel good, but I don't know it.
Yeah.
Right? People don't even know how good they can feel until they start feeling better. And then they're like, holy shit.
Yeah.
I get those responses.
Yeah, sure.
Breathing, and all of a sudden they start telling me, oh my God. So when I'm not breathing and I'm over breathing, I'm getting the lower part of the DNA. So then we go, oh no, you're genetically predisposed. We all have it. It's all in our DNA. But how do you explain spontaneous remission of cancer? It's because the DNA fully activated, and disease can't live in a state of being, in a state of presence. So Dr. Dispenza teaches people through meditation techniques to do that. And heal people, well, not he has, they have healed themselves through sitting still. Now I don't practice his meditation technique, I should, but I do it through my subtle breath. I just sit there in a meditation pose, whatever works for me best, and I focus on those tiny sips of air. And I can feel the gas exchange in my body. I can feel the parts where I feel like I'm energetically blocked. So you sort of relax, you let go of all your muscles, and now your body's holding itself up with fascia, because otherwise you'd be a puddle of water on the ground. And your fascia is 80% proprioceptive internal feeling state.
Right.
Now can change your whole body physically.
Right.
Change your state of being.
So interesting, especially when you reduce it down to the description you gave. There's so many thoughts that come to mind. I could go on and on. I mean, over the years, just stream of consciousness here. For example, thoughts become things. You are what you believe. high vibration, positive vibrations or energy, they cancel out or they squash lower negative vibrations. If you can get into a more higher resonating space, of course, according to what I read, and basically what you're saying about this whole DNA thing, and you should be able to make changes just through your intention, your breathing. And to me, it's amazing. Actually, I know you and I talked about my eye. So I have spent, for the first time in my life, I've meditated 2 days in a row, because usually it's once a year since I met you. And I didn't do it till I got home because I was just making excuses not to. And I wanted to get into a place where it's quiet. And where I live, it's pretty quiet. So I've been trying to take time and not allow all kinds of distractions to occur that cause me to think things. Not that they're bad. It's just there's some stressors, and I'm actually already feeling, just from like 20 minutes one day and 20 minutes the next day, that I feel, I don't know, maybe more relaxed, more. I can tell you this, I definitely feel more in the moment, and I've been super productive these past 2 or 3 days. I've been writing my ass off for my book, which I'm way behind on, and I have much better focus. I suppose that should be a byproduct of all the things we're talking about.
Yeah.
Feeling better. A couple of the areas where I tend to have pain, I'm not having nearly as much.
Yeah.
I really think I have blocked energy occurring in my right hip. I think that there's an energy thing going on there. It's been yeah, my left ankle too. But
But you can breathe into it. I mean, the Taoists have been doing this for 5,000 years. Just been Taoist bone breathing. And a lot of women who have had osteoporosis, the ones that have practiced it and stuck with it, have reversed osteoporosis through bone breathing. And bone breathing is simply just sitting there with your hands up and visualizing, inhaling energy through your fingertips and into your bones.
Wow.
Do it. You just, because it's a focus. So that's what transcendental meditation is. They give you a mantra.
Yeah.
You repeat the mantra, but they do that because it's a focus. And when your mind stops thinking about other things, it allows the ether to rewrite the information and to download you information. And we know this to be true again, because when they studied at Harvard, when they studied monks and they put the EEG machine around their head, it doesn't touch their head, they saw the brain scans and the waves were going like this off the chart. And they were like, well, if these guys are 30-year meditators, they're not supposed to be thinking. Why is the brain active? Because there's information being downloaded from the ether. And that's why they have these higher conscious thoughts and why they are the people they are, because they see the good in everything. So it's been able to unlock their hidden DNA powers. And monks in Tibet have been known to levitate, all that kind of stuff. You have that power. I have that power. We're just under the program and belief, because we weren't taught it, that we don't.
Yeah.
So we're not exhibiting it. But once you start to believe it, once you start to get the feeling that you believe it, it will happen.
I love that, man. Well, let me ask you this. We'll work towards wrapping it up, but it's actually really, it seems so early to do that. But it just means we're going to have maybe part 2, part 3.
Yeah. Nice.
Let me ask you this. So for anybody out there, anybody at all, I know that everyone has different issues, different stressors, different pain, different whatever, different abilities of where they can, how they can move and what they can do, and different thoughts. And some people are depression, some people, whatever. If you have one piece of advice, one set of words of wisdom to deliver, or a takeaway message, what is it?
Yeah, it's a great thing. Honestly, get a popsicle stick, stick it in between your teeth. And for 5 minutes, start with 5 minutes every day. Sit there with your tongue on the roof of your mouth, your lips closed, and breathe as softly as you can. And at the end of the 5 minutes, I want you to hum. So the stick is in between your teeth, and then you're going to go, and swallow.
Mm-hmm.
What that does is it neurologically activates all the new neuroplasticity neurons you built while you were in relaxation. And the humming creates vibration of all the cranial nerves, and vibration chant. I mean, that's why people chant. They chant to unlock their energy centers.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the same thing. So humming at the end of your 5 minutes, you hum as loud as you can, and you could do it throughout the day. You could put a stick in your mouth at any time throughout the day when you're stressed. It could take 60 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Stick between your teeth, tongue on the roof of your mouth, hum, swallow. And it centers you. It vibrates your cranial nerves, and I'm keeping it very simple. It vibrates everything, glossopharyngeal, it activates the diaphragm, and it calms you down. And you can deal with stress better when you're in a calm state, because instead you don't see it as stress, you see it as how can you find a solution for it.
Yeah.
It starts to happen.
Yeah, I can relate to that. Bless you. Yeah, I can totally relate to that. Bless you again. I think that's great. In fact, I'm going to do that when we get off here. I'm going to try that because all these things that you have shared, like since I met you last week for lunch, and just all these things make everything is starting. What you're doing actually is you're helping me to understand a lot of other stuff I've heard out there, and like be able to tie it together now. And this is one of the things I love about meeting people and learning from them is, some things, they kind of make sense on a certain level. This is the good thing to do. This is the optimal thing or the right or the correct thing to do, but why? And you understand a little bit of why. And then, like you have just explained to me, and I'm sure a lot of the listeners and viewers, enough science to be able to tie it together, because to me that gives it more meaning that way too. And it's like that will actually cause me to do it, because now I can go in with an intention that I couldn't before, because I have a better understanding and I can get a better result. So this is amazing, man. I love this stuff.
Yeah.
I love it.
It's good. I feel like people channel information all the time. Well, when I meditate, I ask in the beginning of my meditation, I open my crown chakra and I send my golden energetic cord to the 13th Christ conscious dimension, and I ask to be bestowed the gift of higher health and wellness, so I may be in service to humanity, releasing them of their fears of samsara and solitary peace. And that's my mission. I only want to help people. So I try to give as much information away as I can. And I love what I do because I've created this intention. When I say that, I've created the intention. And it seems like these things that better the human physical vessel come to me. And I'm able to put them together and then speak them out.
I love it. And the way you articulate is you do that so well. And I appreciate that too, because I can tell that you've talked about this a time or two in your life or a few thousand times. And that's so cool though, right? Because you're able to deliver this in a way where I'm able to understand. And I'm actually, quite honestly, I'm a very slow learner. Well, that's a belief I have, so maybe I have to get rid of that one.
For you, for catching.
I have always considered myself to be a slow learner. However, I know that that's actually not true, and I can make changes. So, catching myself in these, when I say these things, when I catch myself, I kind of feel good about it, because I don't want to be affirming something that actually isn't, or that will hold me back. Yeah.
Then one of our parts could be talking about Psyche and the subconscious program.
Yes. I still have that in my notes here too. I need to look that up, and I need to, Emily. I met with Emily Spickle after. Hey, Kitty. What's it? The kitty's name is
Apollo.
Apollo. Love it. Love it. Well, I I propose that we do this again sometime soon. If you feel there's enough information for a part 2 of breathing, we should do that, seriously.
Yeah.
Or you can get into more science if you want to. But there's other things you and I need to talk about too. So I'm going to have you on as a frequent flyer in the program.
Nice. Awesome. Cool.
Do you have any, if people want to get a hold of you, they want to learn more about you, do you have a place where people can look you up, whether it's online, Facebook, website, or anything like that?
Yeah, my website is quantumfitness.org.
Okay.
And my email is quantumfitnessorg@gmail.com.
Okay, great. I'll put a link to that site on the screen. And then for people who listen on the iTunes version of this, which is audio only, it's quantumfitness.org.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
I consider myself a human performance specialist.
I love it.
So
Awesome, man.
it's about trying to really better the human being, but from the cellular level.
See, that's,
the cellular level.
I love that. Well, listen, man, you're going to stay on with me for a minute, but I'm going to say so long to the viewers and the listeners, and I want to thank Bryan. Thank you so much, man. This is so insightful, and I know we're just hitting the tip of the iceberg here, so we have a lot more to talk about. So you'll be back soon. We'll do this again. Maybe we can do one of these in person too, because I prefer to do those, but I don't always have time to do it. So thank you.
Yeah.
And to our viewers, thank you very much. I know I learned a lot, and I hope you did too. I'm sure you did. So come back, check, share this with your friends. I think there's a message I've been putting out there recently. I used to just say goodbye, and thank you. But now it's, instead of goodbye and thank you, which I do mean sincerely, thank you. Remember that there is so much out there that we can do to help ourselves to be better. And I always look at it like this: the better I become for myself, the more I can be for other people. And that's really my end game goal. My end goal is I want to help as many people as I can to do things, to improve their quality of life. Let's put it that way, right? And the way I go about that is just happens to be more in the movement disorder arena, with helping them to wake up nervous system and brain and move better, fall down less. And when that happens, life changes, because when you turn into, when you go from feeling defeated to feeling unstoppable, this is good for you and everybody around you. So seek out people like Bryan, learn from them, because if you're in the New York City area or anywhere even close, contact him and go see him, because he has so much to offer. This stuff, you don't find this stuff in the standard fitness industry. You don't find it at any certifying agency out there. They don't even talk about breathing hardly at all. There's so many other things they don't talk about too. I'm not trying to disparage anything, but seek out people like Bryan, learn, grow, and the more we do this, like I always say, it ain't about me, it's about we. Because the more we learn and grow together, the better we can be and make a bigger impact on the world. And that is the shit, my friend. Pardon my French, but that's the way it is. That's what I want. You, my friend, you are doing that. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. You too.
All right. Thanks again, everybody. Have a fantastic day. See you soon.